Welcome back to the home of Peter Pan lore and Peter Pan facts here on YouTube. I am your Peter Pan hobbyist and enthusiast, bringing you fun facts, lore and trivia, talk about the world of Peter Pan, the story of the Neverland, and today we are continuing with our 120 years of Peter Pan costumes series. Now, I think that for the month of Pride, which has just passed us by, I think that this is a very, very appropriate video to be making because today we are talking all about Peter Pan musicals. I'll do you a rundown of all the different musicals inspired by Peter Pan, and then we're going to talk about the costumes as well and where I think they draw some of their inspiration from. So, in chronological order then, here are as many musicals based on the story of Peter Pan as I could find. There are probably more that I have missed out from various different places, and I am sorry. So, here we go. Number one, we've got the 1950s, the Leonard Bernstein Peter Pan musical. And then we have 1954 with the Mary Martin musical. And then in 1974, Cathy Rigby took on the role. We also have other people like Sandy Duncan and people playing the role of Peter Pan, but it's the same musical. More on Cathy Rigby later though, and I will be talking about her a lot in this video. In 1975, there were workshops for a musical called Neverland, which eventually became Bat Out of Hell. I do not consider Bat Out of Hell to be a Peter Pan musical because it is not in any way telling the story of Peter Pan. It is very loosely inspired by it, so I don't relate the two at all. Still a cracking musical though, give it a listen if you can. I particularly enjoy All Revved Up and Nowhere to Go. Love that song. It gives me very strong American Idiot musical vibes, and I have always wanted to play Saint Jimmy in that. What do you reckon? So yeah, that one, it counts in terms of on this list, it counts. However, it's not really a Peter Pan adaptation, so I won't be talking about the costumes in that, but it's important for the list, so I thought I'd include it. We then go forwards to 1985, where we have Peter Pan, the British musical. Then in 1991, Cathy Rigby went on tour with that version again. Then in 1996, Peter Pan, a Musical Adventure came out. This one is my favourite, and you'll have heard me talk about that quite a lot before. In 1997, there was a Peter Pan puppet musical brought out, but I can't find any footage of that anywhere. So unfortunately, the fact that it was made by Lisa Corwin and it involved puppets, that's about as much as I can find out, but it sounds brilliant. We have Cathy Rigby back again in 2004, continuing to tour all through the rest of the decades. In 2011, Cathy Rigby once again. In 2012, we have Finding Neverland, the musical. In 2013, we have a show called Lost Boy. In 2014, we have the Peter Pan Opera. And then we have in 2014 as well, Peter Pan Live, which unfortunately I'll have to talk about, but the least said about that, the better, to be honest. All right, let's talk costumes. So, interesting to note is that the original stage play and in fact the novel of Peter Pan have both had music in them. There have been lullabies, the mermaid song, the pirate songs in particular, Wendy singing about the little house that she wants. So music has always gone hand in hand with Peter Pan, which I think is really exciting when we look at how many musicals it has spawned over the years as well. Our journey into the musicals of Peter Pan actually starts with what is not described as a musical, but is described as Peter Pan, a fantasy with music. This is the Leonard Bernstein Peter Pan from 1950. Now this musical, not quite a musical, has some beautiful moments. I really love the pirate song, Captain Hook's soliloquy. I love it when Wendy sings. I very strongly dislike the song Peter Peter because I feel it makes Wendy a little bit pathetic, but it does have some beautiful moments, particularly the instrumental music. Very beautiful as they're flying over the Neverland and things. What I don't really find particularly inspiring is Peter Pan's costume. Now this is coming partly as a Peter Pan hobbyist and enthusiast who loves this character and thinks he deserves a spectacular costume, but it is also coming from someone who makes costumes. I am a cosplayer. I have made many costumes. I have made many Peter Pan costumes, and yeah, I won't be replicating this one, I have to say. It is one of my least favourites. It just seems dull. Look at this picture, for example. We have the wonderful Marcia Henderson as Wendy and Peter over here. Just look at their costumes. Look at the shapeless tunic that is nothing that is on Peter, and look at the beautiful leafy dress that Wendy is in. This being probably a call to the leafy dress that Wendy made herself while she was living on the Neverland. It's so dull in comparison. To make this shapeless tunic exciting, you would have to do so much to it. It would have to be tie-dyed to within an inch of its life, all different colours and patterns and shapes, but there is none of that. It's just bland and dull. I mean, look at this picture here. It's just shapeless and nothing. There's no imagination to it at all. I'm genuinely quite disappointed. But this costume, to be honest, does seem to match fairly well with the musical it is from. Sorry, musical, not a musical. Totally not a musical. I enjoy some of the moments, but overall, it's a bit lacking, and yeah, I'm not particularly inspired by it. So moving on to the next one. Next up, I'm going to talk about the Mary Martin costume in particular, and I'm going to reference a few other Peters who have played in this version of the show as well. But mostly we're going to talk about Mary Martin and Cathy Rigby. All hail. Let's start with Mary Martin. Now, Mary Martin's costume is... I quite like it. I paused. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have paused. The costume calls back in many different ways to the greener, leafier costumes of people like Maud Adams, and I very much enjoy that. I love the different shades and colourings and patterns on it. It is visually very interesting, and I really enjoy that. What I don't enjoy so much about it is just how short it is. I know that these people are playing as a boy, and it all makes sense for that, but the costume just ends up looking just a tiny bit too skimpy for me. I want it to be a couple inches longer, partly because of songs like Oh My Mysterious Lady, which I find incredibly uncomfortable to watch, and I'm very glad have been removed from later versions of the show. Yeah. But in terms of the costume, ignoring that, in terms of the costume as a costume, very beautiful. I love the different details on it, the different colours and shapes and textures, and I really love the fact that it harkens back all the way to the Maud Adams style of Peter Pan costumes. Let's talk about Sandy Duncan for a second. Why not? Now, Sandy Duncan's costume you can see here, and here's Mary Martin, just for comparison. Just look how ridiculously short that is. Anyway, so love Mary Martin as an actress. That costume, just a couple more inches, please. This is Sandy Duncan. I'll find you guys a better picture and I'll put it up on the screen in a minute. So, Sandy Duncan playing the same role of Peter Pan in the same musical. I don't mind this costume. It's just a bit like Jean Arthur's. It's giving lackluster. And with a character like Peter Pan, as I've said so many times before, this fantastical creature of essentially another world who has stopped being human and lives this fantastical life, I think he deserves better than a green button-up shirt and a waistcoat. I really do. It's a nice costume, it fits, I like the dark shade of the leggings, I quite like the boots. I'm a big fan of Peter Pan boots, as we know. I think it needs more. It needs more textures and more colours. The way that I would save this, if this was a costume I was told I had to use, is, again, I would tie-dye it, I would add things to it, I would put stitching into it, add more details, turn it from just a plain green into leaves and vines and shapes and things. I would be pushed to say that it calls back to any of the other Peter Pan costumes, possibly simply for colour alone, the Maud Adams ones, but that's about it. So Sandy Duncan, I think, deserves a better costume, but it's not the worst one, but it's definitely not one of my favourites. And now we have finally come to it. Let us talk. We're only at the beginning of this video, but we've already got to it. The highlight moment for me. Cathy Rigby as Peter Pan. I promise to try not to get too distracted by talking about how incredibly amazing this actress is. Cathy Rigby is a gymnast, an acrobat, an athlete, she's amazing and I love her very, very much. I've done many videos talking about her before and I will do many videos talking about her again. All hail Cathy Rigby, my favourite and the best Peter Pan of all time. Let's look at that costume then. Cathy Rigby has had quite a few Peter Pan costumes. She has been in so many revivals and I am so glad. She played the character of Peter Pan until she was well over the age of 50 and pulled it off better than anybody else I've ever seen. The costumes are all quite similar. They have similar vibes, the green aesthetic, definitely calling back to a lot of the Maud Adams green ones, but there is a lot of leafy detailing as well, which calls back to the original stage costumes, the more reddish ones. Despite Cathy Rigby not wearing red, she is wearing the leaves and shoulders in different places that are very similar placements to the original costumes worn by Nina and Jean Forbes Robertson. Now, looking in particular at my favourite Cathy Rigby costume, you can see where Sandy Duncan's costume could have gone if only they'd pushed it that little bit further. You can see almost the same colours, the same shades of green, but it's done so much better here. There are the acorn buttons, the leaves in different colours and textures cascading, the fantastic brown, almost corsety piece in the middle, which not only adds extra layers and decoration and depth to the costume, but also does a fantastic job at hiding the wire harness for flying. And Cathy Rigby's flying harness was extra special because she did flips. So lots of very special harnessing hidden under this costume, and an amazing job too. She's got a huge bag full of glitter, which I love every time I see that. But just look at all the detailing, the little extra touches that they didn't need to add, but they did. Everywhere. This costume is so busy and exciting, even down to the shoes. I really love these boots. Of course, one of the most important parts of this costume is that Cathy is able to move in it. As I said, she's a gymnast and acrobat. She's not just walking around on the stage and singing. She is also doing flips and tumbling, doing the splits, doing so many wonderful things that are just so very Peter, all over the place. And the costume has to move and breathe with her. I really love how they've designed it to do that. The leggings obviously stretch very, very well and are a beautiful dark shade of rich green. The boots obviously have amazing traction and grip, and they're also covered in little details and leaves as well. And you can also see the different belts, the different pieces of colour and texture, and the sort of crisscross designs. Everything is so busy. I absolutely adore this costume so very much. I think the colours are definitely inspired by the Maud Adams style of costumes, but the rest of the design is definitely Nina all the way. The next musical to talk about is the 1985 Peter Pan, a British musical. And the problem is, this has been produced a few different times, and I can't find that many pictures of it. They all seem to get washed away by the Mary Martin and the more modern versions. Hello, I am coming to you in voiceover form to talk about Peter Pan the British Musical because for some reason all the footage I filmed of me talking about it completely got wiped while I was editing this video and I cannot get it back. So here I am in voiceover form, please enjoy. So the picture you can see on the screen right now is of Nicholas Stapleton, who plays Peter Pan in the cast recording of Peter Pan the British Musical, and this is the one that I'm going with because it's the one that I know the best. I have had a look at some other productions of Peter Pan the British Musical, and a lot of them seem to go for the greener, leafier Peter Pan that calls back on the Maud Adams style of costume. However, Nicholas Stapleton's is different, as you can see. In comparison to the Peter on the cover of the album art, Nicholas seems to be wearing a more Nina style of costume. Now, the cut of it and the shape is very Sandy Duncan. However, the colours, the brown and the sort of reddish colours, they are very Nina, a bit like the early stage productions. So it's an interesting mix, this. It's not my favourite, it doesn't have enough detailing, but nonetheless, the colours are interesting, and I like the fact that they went for, well, not green, to be honest. So, in the middle for me, but it still does the job, and I think it works quite well. Next up, we're going to 1996, and here we have another brand new Peter Pan musical called Peter Pan, a Musical Adventure. Now, this one is my absolute favourite. It is my favourite Peter Pan musical, and I absolutely love it. The reason I love the Cathy Rigby musical is purely for Cathy Rigby alone, and no matter which one she was in, I would love her the most. However, this, Peter Pan, a Musical Adventure, this is my favourite musical. However, they don't always have my favourite Peter Pan costumes. Let's dive in and have a look. The main costume I want to talk about for this one is from James Gillan, who played the role of Peter Pan in the 2009 recording. Small side note before I talk about the costumes. So James Gillan is, apart from being a fantastic Peter Pan, I love how he sings, it's absolutely gorgeous. I love how he emotes all the way through this CD, it's fantastic. But also, he has a fantastic stage presence. Now, unfortunately, I never got to see him as Peter Pan. However, I have had the privilege, nay, the pleasure, of seeing him twice live on stage. The first time, he was Bok in Wicked, and the second time, he was Lord Farquaad in Shrek the Musical. When I saw him as Lord Farquaad, that was earlier this year, I knew exactly who he was, and I was so looking forward to seeing him live, knowing who he was, and he was absolutely fantastic. So, small side note, go follow James Gillan's stuff. Fantastic actor. Moving back to the costumes. Now, this Peter Pan costume is very interesting. It kind of looks like big, floofy pajamas, which if nothing else must have been really comfy to perform in, I hope. Now, I really like the patchwork effects, and I quite like the different stripes and textures and things. This calls back to those really first original Peter Pan costumes, the Maud Adams one, and also as well, the Nina costume with the different patches of leaves and different things. I enjoy the fact that it seems to draw back on those. And crucially, of course, this Peter Pan costume is red. we finally have another Peter Pan in a red outfit. It has been decades at this point. Most of them have been leafy and green, and finally we have Peter back in red again. I absolutely love it. I love this choice. I love the different patchworky bits. I love the stripes and the different pieces. I love that they have chosen to go with this. It draws back to, with the patchworks and the different bits of things and the stitching, a little bit of the Maud Adams style costumes, but also predominantly the Nina and the Jean Forbes Robertson red tunicky costumes. I really hope that that's what they were going for with this. I really hope that they look back at the original costumes and the colours. I hope they read the text of the play and the novel, and they read all the different things about the skeleton leaves and the juices that ooze out of trees, and crucially, the autumn leaves as well. So wherever the inspiration came from, I can see it dating back all the way to the original stage play, and I love that that's what they went with. It's not my favourite costume, but I definitely really enjoy it. Let's move on then to the next musical and the next costumes. All right, now we're going to skip ahead into the 2000s and we're going to go to 2012. In the meantime here, we've had a lot of revivals of different musicals, particularly the Mary Martin and Cathy Rigby musical. Cathy Rigby has been on tour as Peter Pan for many, many years at this point. But now we're looking at a different and brand new musical. And this is Finding Neverland. Peter isn't in it a great deal, but let's look at when he is. I very much enjoy this Peter Pan costume. It looks quite similar to some of the ones we've seen before, particularly Cathy Rigby's. I enjoy that it has a lot of the different leafy details. Again, much like with Cathy Rigby's, it has to be very stretchy because this is a dancing part. There is some singing and stuff that goes along with it, but in the Finding Neverland stage musical, the Peter Pan part is a dancer primarily. In a lot of the versions, you'll see him dancing around J.M. Barrie at the beginning, and he comes back in at the end. He dances with Sylvia. It's a very beautiful role, and good God, if I could get my leg up that high, I would love to play Peter in this version. So I love it. Aesthetically, it's beautiful, it's green, it's leafy, it definitely looks like Cathy Rigby's costume, very similar shades of colours, which also means that it pinpoints all the way back in time a little bit to the Maud Adams green leafy costumes, all the busyness and things happening there, but also as well, because of those leaves on the shoulders, you've got a little bit of the Nina costume and the originals. While it's not in red, it does still have the leafy shoulder details and all them cascading around, so I very much love that. It is a little bit disappointing when you look at Finding Neverland the musical, which, while being about the creation of Peter Pan, the character Peter Pan isn't in it very much. This is a bit part. Looking at the costume they created for this bit part, who isn't in it very much at all, and comparing it to, oh, I don't know, say Jean Arthur's costume, or even Sandy Duncan's, it's disappointing when you compare the bit part costume to the main character costumes. But still, Finding Neverland, I love this costume, I love this Peter, I really love this role as well. And while they play a little bit fast and loose with J.M. Barrie's actual history, it is nonetheless a beautiful show. Really love it. There are loads of different slimes of it on the internet if you want to have a watch. There's also a cast recording as well, so highly recommend checking out Finding Neverland. The costume is really good and the music is amazing as well. Well, here we are. We are coming to the very end of this episode of the 120 years of Peter Pan costumes, this time looking at musicals. There is one more that I'm going to talk about before we finish, and there is a 10-year gap that I'm going to leave now. So the last one we're going to talk about is from 2014, and I am going to be leaving the gap of 2014 to 2024 because that's going to be another video later on in this series where I talk about more modern productions and modern versions of Peter Pan. So in the last decade or so, that's going to come later. Unfortunately, this does mean that we are finishing the video on my least favourite version of a Peter Pan musical ever, with my two least favourite actors who have ever played the role of Peter and Captain Hook, both of whom are fantastic actors in their own right, but in this particular show, yeah, well, one of them clearly didn't know what he was doing and forgot all his lines, and the other one showed no emotion whatsoever and looked like she didn't want to be there. I am, of course, unfortunately talking about Peter Pan Live, with Christopher Walken as Captain Hook and Alison Williams as Peter Pan. Now, I admit the next words out of my mouth will probably come as a surprise, especially to those of you who have watched my videos where I've talked about this version of the production before, where I've talked about how Alison Williams, while being a fantastic actress in other things, was terrible and wrongly cast for Peter Pan, had a lovely singing voice, but that does not save you from looking bored the entire way through. Anyway, ignoring all of that, the following sentence is going to sound very unusual, but bear with me here. I really didn't mind the costume. Hear me out. So this costume of Alison Williams's, it is a little bit too shiny for me, especially considering they are filming this live under studio lights. At some points, it looked like wearing high vis. It was a bit much, but I really quite like the design and the ideas. And actually, when you think about it, it looks quite similar to Sandy Duncan's Peter Pan costume. And with that, it also has some similarities to the Cathy Rigby one and the original stage costumes as well. I hope, and I'm choosing to believe, that the people who designed this costume were looking back at the original costumes and at least drew some inspiration from it. Much like the Styles and Drew one, Peter Pan: A Musical Adventure, that we saw James Gillan wearing, it's very patchworky and mishmashy, and that definitely works with the role of Peter Pan and the world of the Neverland as well. I quite like the random bits of fish net. It gives the impression of fishing net or net from the pirate ship or something that he could have found somewhere and added to his outfit, that kind of thing. I like the different strips of colour looking like it's been cobbled together almost. I also enjoy the different shades and shapes and the different patterns. It doesn't look like one thing. It looks like it has been pieced together over the years, maybe even patched and repaired as well. You all know that I very much enjoy a good Peter Pan boot. These ones are okay. They're a good shade of brown or a good lace-up pair of boots. Not particularly fantastical. I think they could have done with a few, leaves on them or a design or something like that. The leggings are fine, a bit plain though, so it's mostly this tunicky bit that I'm looking at, and to be honest, it's quite exciting. I don't like how shiny, as I said, a lot of it is quite shiny, including the leggings in that as well actually, and I kind of wish that there was a hat. It's not very often that I wish Peter Pan was in a hat. I do enjoy the costumes where he has one. There are some hats I haven't been as fond of, and not every Peter has needed one. And in fact, going way back in time, sometimes he's had a big leafy hood instead. I just feel like there's something else that could have been happening, especially because, unlike Cathy Rigby, who really could not have worn a hat, Alison Williams wasn't doing any big flips and tumbling. Nothing was happening that would have shaken the hat from her head during this production, particularly because of how bored she looked most of the time. Anyway, so I think that a hat could have been an extra little flair on this costume, particularly if you draw it back to some of the original hats with a big sweeping design and a huge piece of plumy feather and something like this. I just think it's a little bit lacking, but as a costume, I don't dislike it. The thing I mind is the person who's performing wearing it. Alright, let's wrap this video up, shall we? So that brings us to the end of this June episode for Pride Month, talking about the musical costumes of Peter Pan over the years. Well, most of the years, leaving some of the more modern ones for a later video. So starting in the 1950s with Leonard Bernstein, going all the way through Mary Martin, Cathy Rigby, Finding Neverland, A Musical Adventure, a British musical, and up to Peter Pan Live. These are just some of the musical versions of Peter Pan and the costumes worn by those playing him. So what is coming next? What is coming for the end of the month of July for this 120 Years of Peter Pan costuming series? Well, I'm pretty excited about it. To be honest, I'm excited about every month when I have to film these videos, but this one in particular I'm very excited about. So for the month of July, I'm going to be taking you through some of the most unique Peter Pan costumes, where you can see where they have drawn inspiration from, but they look like nothing else that any actor who has played Peter Pan has ever worn. There are 5 costumes I'm going to be talking about, 2 in particular, and one of them I'm going to be attempting to make if I have the time. Wish me luck, guys. Alright, so that brings us to the end of this episode of 120 Years of Peter Pan costumes. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. If there's anything you'd like me to talk about in terms of the lore, the history, the story of the Neverland and Peter Pan, let me know in the comments down below as well. Thank you for engaging with this series. If you're not following me over on TikTok, jump over there and do so. I am also on Instagram as well. I just keep forgetting to post on there. And if you want to support me, then I have a Patreon page for Peter Pan lore and for myself as Marcus Noise the cosplayer as well. Have a wonderful and amazing rest of your day and your week and your life. Be great to each other, and I will see you very, very soon. Goodbye.